Check the plane before it takes off. We gotta check a few things before we take off here. And then we're gonna get into my 30-minute bio. Nice and sweet. Very humble guy. Alright. Everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Pretty good? Do I have to yell? Alright, that's dry as right here. Nope. Oh, it looks like it's time. There we go. Oh, giving away all my images. Wrong direction. All right. There we go. Let's stare at that beautiful scene for a little while. So I don't like to talk about myself a whole lot, so I'm going to keep this really brief. First, I am really psyched to be here and talk to you guys. I prepped a lot for this, so really glad to be here. So thanks for coming and listening. Really appreciate you all. Secondly, I'm a pastor over in Penyan, like half an hour from here. Manual Baptist Church. I love teaching the Bible. And also, a shout out to my wife. We brought 2 kids here. So I'm the info guy. Like I love putting concepts on, but like the artistic design, anything that's like not black and white boring, that's due to my wife. So thanks to her, my presentation would be a lot less cool without her. So, all right, that's about it. If you have any other questions about me, just talk to me. I'm an approachable guy. I'll be here all week long, just like haunting the camp and just being around. So I'm approachable, especially if you play volleyball. You're instantly my BFF. So yeah, I'll be at the volleyball court the entire week. All right. How many of you have heard or watched the movie Sully? Tom Hanks is in it. Sully. All right. So I'm glad a lot of you don't know because it means my intro is a lot cooler. Basically, it's a story about this pilot, real life story, who he's a pilot in a plane, and things are going along pretty smoothly. You know, he's been a pilot for years, lots of flights. And then all of a sudden, one of the most terrifying things that can happen if you're flying a plane happens. And that is birds fly straight through the engine. Like, I guess the plane just went right through a herd of birds. And that just wrecked the engines. And so, you're a pilot, so you're the captain and all that. So you have to now make a decision. Your plane's going down. You have a bunch of passengers. You know, I think it was over, I forget the exact amount, but it was over 100 passengers. And this pilot, played by Tom Hanks, of course, okay, he manages to achieve a water landing in the Hudson River with everything intact. Like, everyone survived, everyone was able to get off the plane in one piece. Like, it was really remarkable. And like, talk about being under pressure and, you know, having to make decisions. You know, all these people, they're counting on you, and he came through. So I just thought that was an interesting segue. This is Flight Academy, right? So we're going to be talking a lot about flight. We're going to be talking about taking spiritual flight, but we're also going to throw in a lot of physical flight too. So we'll see how interesting we can get through 9 sessions, how much yardage, how much mileage we can get out of the flight theme. Okay. So let's do a quick overview. Welcome to Flight Academy. What is that going to look like for this week? Let's start off by see if we can synchronize everything here. Next slide. That's very pretty, but we're not going to stare at that the entire time. All right. Oh man, we'll figure this out. All right. So just visualize this with me, okay? We're going to be looking at Colossians chapter 3, 17 verses of it, which if that was in one session, that's crazy, but it's 9 sessions, so stretches out pretty nicely, okay? And I want us to picture it like those verses are like a stretch of beach, okay? And we're sort of combing through the beach with a metal detector, just trying to find all the valuables, all right? So that's what we're going to be trying to do this week. Maybe the picture will come up later, but there's a guy, kind of a lonely guy, just on the beach all by himself, trying to find cool stuff on the beach. Anyway, another thing we're going to be doing is, of course, and I already mentioned this, but we are going to be playing around with the theme of flight. So in other words, the Bible gives us a set your mind on things above things. So let's work with that. Let's use our imaginations to be up in the air as much as possible. Especially, it's pretty easy with our technology and all that. We can come up with a lot of cool illustrations, and that's great. Another heads up, no visual for this one. Oh, there he is. He just popped up. All right, teleported.
They used the mouse back there.
Sarah?
They used the mouse back there.
Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate it. So, what we're going to do with these verses, we are going to be looking at multiple verses for some sessions, and other sessions we're really going to slow down and maybe take a verse or two and just try to squeeze as much juice out of it as we can. So it depends, all right? And then, at the end, when we're sort of closing off each session for the night, I'm going to tip you guys off. So you're like, oh, there's going to be an end to this guy talking. I'm going to tip you off that I'm almost done by, let's see. We will figure this out. Thanks, guys. Yeah, next one, please. There we go. We're going to land the plane. So that image will come up every time that we're at a close of a session. We're going to land the plane. That means final points, wrap up, and then we'll be done. So we got all that? Yeah. All right. So let's buckle up. Turns out flying is really dangerous if you're not ready and equipped for the different risks that are involved. So, darn it. All right. I'll have to mind meld with the team back there. It is not their fault, by the way. So, no fault of theirs. But this is we'll list 3 dangers of flight. All right. The first one is hypoxia. They all have these really kind of dangerous sounding names. Okay. So hypoxia is what happens when you go too high and you're not prepared for it. You can lose consciousness. You could have a seizure, or you can get permanent brain damage. So in other words, you can't just sort of go up into the sky, up and up and up, and not expect any effect. So you have to be wary of this. Okay. A second thing, there it is. A second thing is barotrauma. Anything with the word trauma in it is not good, right? Safe to say. So this is basically ear bleeding. This is what happens when you go too high and just the pressure can't handle it. So there's that to watch out for. And then this last one is decompression sickness. So this sounds really weird. Basically, gas bubbles form inside you, and they wreck your heart, your brain, and your spine. So you can literally come back physically deformed. And they have really intense muscle aches and joint pain. And anyway, so in other words, it's a hostile environment up there. We take that for granted, but you got to prepare. And I just want us to keep that in mind, because as it turns out, what God is going to try to do, what he's trying to explain in Colossians 3, is that there is another realm besides this one. And in that realm, the most important things connected to real life happen or are connected to that. And you need a guide. You need a good pilot. You need someone who knows the dangers and understands how it works to be able to explain it. And so that's what Colossians 3 is about. All right, so we're going to just cover the first 2 verses tonight. And we're going to start off with verse 1. Turns out I fixed the problem. I was pressing the wrong button. So I think we should be good. But let's read this together, okay? Colossians 3, verse 1. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Paul's kind of in the middle of something here. He's not starting the letter. We're in Colossians 3, right? Not Colossians 1. So it sounds like we're interrupting him a little bit, sort of breaking into a conversation that he's already started, and that's true. So let's slow this down, and I want us to notice 3 flight levels. Paul, with each little statement there, it's like he's elevating higher and higher and higher. So watch this, okay? Flight level 1, let's say it starts at 20,000 feet. He says we've been resurrected from the lowest place. Notice how he says you have been raised with Christ. That's a mind-blowing statement right away. And Paul kind of doesn't slow down for us to appreciate what that means. So we're kind of like, oh, yeah, raised with Christ, yeah, cool. It basically means we were dead at one point, but now there is no lower place to go than death, right? So to be resurrected from that, and now, as we're going to see, Paul's like, you're not just resurrected, you're not just resuscitated, oh, I'm a corpse, I'm alive again. He starts off there, that's a big one. And then he climbs up another 10,000 feet, and he says that you need to, since you've been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above. In other words, God took you from this realm of deadness. You belong there. That was your home. That was your identity. Now, you're in this new world. You're in this new realm. And this realm has everything important and everything you need to know. So this is where you breathe. This is where you live. This is where you focus on. Okay? So he says that. We're at 30,000 feet now. And by the way, notice the way he words it is not just seek the things above. In the Greek, it's keep seeking. In other words, this is something that you continually do. It's not like you peek up once in a while and think about spiritual stuff and it's like, oh, that's cool. There's someone up there, higher power, whatever. It's like, no, you need to keep revisiting. Keep going back up there. Keep thinking about things relating to that new realm that you've been rescued to. Okay? The rest of the section of Colossians we're going to look at explains all that, all the next 17 verses. But for now, Paul has one more flight level to get up to, 40,000 feet. Is this just about, focusing on high stuff, high spiritual floaty stuff up there somewhere? No, he gets specific. He's like, seek the things that are above where Christ is. What makes the realm up there so fascinating is not like, it's just high up or it's just different. It's there's a person who his headquarters are there, so to speak. And who he is and what he's done has completely reshaped and changed everything about life. So, you're not just seeking a place, you're seeking a person. But you're not going to find him just looking down here on earth, just living your day-to-day life and never thinking about this supernatural realm that's above you. So Paul's like, look up. 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 feet. With each phrase, he's like building up higher and higher, like layering up. You guys like, it's not old school. Fruit by the foot. You guys ever like fruit by the foot? I love fruit by the foot. This is truth by the foot. How's that? More truth the higher you get up. Lame and cheesy, but I had to say it. It's part of my script, so deal with it. All right? So that's verse 1. So already we see that there's something special. And by the way, Paul he can't even resist, right? He can't even resist telling us why Jesus is special. He doesn't just say, Jesus is up there. He also says, Jesus is seated at the right hand of the Father, right? Which you have to think that to be seated at the right hand in that culture is like the highest position of honor and authority. Like, the Father is this very important being, right? God the Father. Jesus is his Son. He sits right at the right hand of the Father. So, in other words, he's like, Jesus is a very important person. Why? Why is he an important person? Well, John 3:16, yes, but let's get deeper than that, right? And that's what Colossians 3 is going to be about. So, since we're only at one more verse, we're really going to slow down here and start to squeeze out the implications of what this means. So, verse 2, Paul continues. Since Jesus is up there, right, set your mind on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. So, I like us to think of it this way. True north. Right? Stranger Things, anybody? True north, right? Yeah, there we go. By the way, I'm going to have a lot of that. I'm going to have a lot of hand raising to see if people are connecting with some of the pop culture references I'm going to be using. So, anyway, yeah, True North. I love Stranger Things. Basically, set your minds on True North. Basically, there's all these wrong and false directions to go and get directions from. So, where should you look? So, basically, setting your minds on True North. There's a few ways that we can do that. So let's start by getting into a few of those ways. Okay? 6 ways to set your mind on things that are above. The first one, throw out all of your busted compasses. Okay, well, what's the busted compass? Well, I'm talking about your own heart. Are you the best person to get directions on how life really works? Is that really something that you possess all the knowledge and all the perspective for that? I can figure that out on myself. I know all about this realm. I know what's important, what's not important, what's true and false, what's right and wrong. Do you really think we all have a handle on that all by ourselves? The Bible would say, Paul would say, God would say, no, you don't. Here are a few ways that our hearts are busted. First off, our hearts are busted, left to themselves, because they point inward. Right? They're not necessarily focused on the right direction. It's more the one direction of you. And so it's almost like this inward curve that keeps looping in on itself. So that's something you have to watch out with the heart. It's not interested in necessarily giving you the right direction. Just maybe a direction that feels the best. But then the question becomes, are feelings good at giving directions? All right? Food for thought a little bit. And then something else to think about. The busted compass of your past. Right? Some people, it's all about their experiences and what they've experienced or not experienced, but the problem is experience is pretty limited, right? And all experience is interpreted. You have to give meaning to what your experience is. You know, what does it mean that I experienced this or didn't experience that? And basically, instead of pointing true north, experiences tend to point to just your past, what you've done or not done. Can anyone really ever do enough to gain enough knowledge, to gain enough wisdom to know about the supernatural realm on their own? I don't think so. What about this one? The busted compass of what's popular. What's wrong with that compass? It points everywhere, right? Popularity comes and goes. What's new? What's getting people's attention? I mean, it's kind of embarrassing. If you even look at 10 years ago, what people were into, it's so different than what it is now. And even now, what people are into now, 10 years from now, people are going to be like, oh, wow, that was a thing. And so we don't want to be like, I'm just going to follow what everyone else thinks is cool. Because after a while, that's, I was lame or whatever. Like we kind of make fun of our parents about it a little, right? They had things that they did. And I know it's cliche to talk about it, but they had like styles and things that they thought were cool that now it just looks like ancient history. And that's going to be us at some point. So we don't want to look there. That compass is spinning around. It's on like Red Bull. It's just it's like hyperly energized, just spinning around. It's not going to give us good directions. Here's another one too. Well, actually, that's all of them. The second point that we want to think about is this. Don't let the supernatural be squeezed out of your life by the ordinary. So in other words, what am I talking about? Well, what I mean is, you get up, you eat, you go to school, you go to work, you have friends and all that. That's fine, that's great. But a lot of people, it's easy to get stuck into thinking that that's life. That's all there is to all this, to existence. Just find what makes you happiest. And, in order to do that, most people have to get a job, unless you have like some rich uncle that's going to just give you $2 billion in inheritance. 0.0001% of the population has that, amazing reality or whatever. But most people have to get into that groove, right? Where are you going to college? What job? What do you want to do with your life? Family? And sometimes, it's almost like people. It's like commuting to work. Sometimes when you have the same commute to work, especially in the big cities, you see some of these people, they'll just look down at their feet for their entire 20-minute walk to the bus or whatever, to the subway. Because they know it's just get your head in the game, just get this over with, and you look down and you just sort of get used to just looking at where you're going, and you never look up. And I mean that figuratively. You don't think about anything else. You just get into that grind of this is all there is to life. And it's not, I'm doing terrible, crazy, sinful, psychotic stuff. It's, you don't think about the supernatural. It's just the ordinary day-to-day life. That's what's got all your attention. And it's almost like there's more. There's more, but we can get distracted and forget about it. I like to call it shrink think. The Bible does a great job of expanding. Like the Bible will blow your mind with how big reality is and how much there is to it, but living only for this life will shrink down that perspective. So this is your view. You're a tunnel vision person. You're just living life 9 to 5, blah blah blah, and there's so much more, but it's blocked off from you. We can call it tracking the trail of truth. Right? God, it's almost like, think of it like a less terrifying version of Hansel and Gretel. So the breadcrumb trail doesn't lead to like a cannibalistic witch. God leaves little breadcrumb trails of there's more to life than just your day-to-day, ordinariness. There's more to that, and it's connected to a person. He's more than just a person. And this realm is more than just another realm. So we want to follow that breadcrumb trail. And God loves to sprinkle these little nuggets, these little hints, these little clues that there's more than all this. And by the way, when we think supernatural realm, heaven's probably not far off from our minds. I'm going to get to heaven a little bit. Heaven has been so lameified in various ways. So let me just say right now, this is a little warm-up. I'm not going to get into a full spiel on it right now, but don't confuse heaven with hymns and harps. Please. Heaven is not a place where all people do all day long for eternity is just sing, 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 sing. But, while your lungs would collapse if you're on earth, now that you're in heaven, you have like glorified lungs so you can sing forever. That doesn't change that. That sounds awful. I mean, anyone else think about that? Like, there will be singing in heaven, of course. I'm not saying there won't be, but it's almost like we're just going to get to heaven and be praising God the whole time. And it's like, and? Is that it? Like, I'm kind of thinking, is there something else than just singing? Or like, you have the stereotypes, you have the little halo, you have the little harps, everyone gets a cloud. It's so lame. Who wants to go there? I don't want to go there. If this is the great big future awaiting me, how about, is there something a little more motivating to eternity than these lame stereotypes? Yes, there is. Yes, there is. We'll get into that a little later, but that's part of the shrink thing. If heaven is actually an amazing place, then you'll want to think about it more. In other words, your mind will expand. You'll want to think beyond just what's going on here, right? And something else about the supernatural realm that we'll discover is that, and I don't want to dismiss this. The ordinary stuff that you do and that we do day in and day out, it absolutely does matter. I'm not saying, you just go to work, you're so lame. You plan to go to some college, how unspiritual. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's more to life than that. I'm not saying that part is like unimportant. In fact, we're going to see that if you do think about the supernatural realm, that will absolutely impact how every day looks like to you. Because you'll realize that every day actually echoes into eternity. You're building an eternal future for yourself based on the choices you make now. So in other words, there's not this perspective in the Bible where it's like, just think on heaven and get this life stuff over with so then you can start beginning a real life in heaven. This life does matter. How you live it matters. How you view it matters. Supernatural realm, thinking about that will shape that for you. Because the Bible is this amazing book where, you have the missionaries going, and then getting slaughtered and burned at the stake. And then there are people who they lived in the same house for 50 years and they have families and they share the gospel and they live for Jesus, but they're not, no one's going to write some huge biography on them or make a movie on them. It's like, their lives didn't matter for Jesus. That's not true. That is not true. It's not like, I'm only someone if I do something dramatic and big for Jesus. Otherwise, I'm just a lame, ordinary Christian. Don't believe that. Do not believe that. A couple things also to think about is be a treasure hunter, not a trash collector. Here's a weird thing about this life, right? God gives us lots of cool things. I mean, even just the concept of food, right? Let's take that base level. There are lots of different organisms on Earth that eat and don't taste what they eat. They just eat to live. They just need it to exist. We are able to sample different foods. We're able to enjoy different flavors. There's texture to food. There's color to food. There's favorite foods. Have you ever thought how that's just how it is? No, that's on purpose. God designed eating to be a little more extra for us, right? But here's the weird thing. When you start looking at the cool things that God gives to us, right? You can think about money, you can think about sex, you can think about food, you can think about all those things. Once you start pursuing those things detached from the supernatural realm, they do become trash. They lose value. If you do appreciate and enjoy those things in connection to the supernatural realm, they stay valuable. But they also have their place. Right? So in other words, it's not money that's seated at the right hand of God in the supernatural realm, right? It's not sex, it's not feeling good, it's not happiness, it's Jesus. So anytime someone wants to just like finger flick Jesus off the throne, the right hand of God, and replace it with something that makes you feel good, you end up taking something that actually is pretty cool and good, but it's not meant to rule. It's not meant to oversee everything. It's not meant to carry all that weight. So it collapses on itself and it becomes this pile of rubbish. And it's ruined. So in other words, what I mean by being treasure hunters, not trash collectors, is we want to understand how are we able to enjoy God's gifts without using those gifts to actually kick him off his rightful place as the number one priority in our lives. So in other words, don't use God's gifts to hijack God. He doesn't get affected by that. We are the ones who pay the price for that. Just letting you know. It ends up whiplashing us in the face. It's just like stretching a huge limb, and it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt real bad. I like to think of it this way. I'm going to skip a couple. Just, trying to hoard God's gifts but ignore God as the giver is like trying to fight over the best seats on the Titanic. It doesn't really matter in the end, right? It's sinking. In other words, these things that we can enjoy temporarily, they will turn into smoke eventually, and you can't grab it any longer. Like, I got the best view on the Titanic. Great. That doesn't mean much, does it? It's all about perspective. Now let's bring it back to Jesus a little bit, because we're going to talk about Jesus a lot. Wow, surprise. Newsflash for you guys. Jesus is going to come up multiple times. Okay? But hopefully in fresh ways. Not in ways that are like, I know that already. Hopefully in ways that are a little fresh, a little thought-provoking. So, Jesus is the GOAT, greatest of all time. In specific ways. Okay? In specific ways. So first off, the Bible uses these different terms for Jesus. It doesn't just say Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. It describes him with different nicknames and titles, and that's really cool. God doesn't like to be boring. So different layers to what Jesus is. So it describes him as a lion. Jesus is. I know we're used to thinking about him as this meek, mild guy sometimes who, everyone's like, oh, but he flipped tables in the temple. That was cool. Yeah, but a lot of times it's almost like Jesus is sort of like really soft and gentle and compassionate, and that's it. And he was those things for sure, but the Bible also describes him as a warrior, as someone who roars, as someone who is to be feared and respected. He sits at the right hand of God. He's the creator of the world. He sustains the universe. You know how hard that is to do? Let's not turn Jesus into this little cat that meows and that's pretty cute. And it's like, you're just so cute and cuddly. Jesus is more than that. And hopefully we see that that's so important to understand. If we want to understand more about the supernatural realm, we do have to realize that we're dealing with the most powerful, impressive being in existence. He deserves respect for that. Something else, it also says he's a lamb. This is fascinating. It is really tricky to call a figure a lion and a lamb, because a lion is fierce and you're afraid of it, and it can protect itself. But a lamb is one of the most innocent, vulnerable creatures on the planet. It's so helpless. It's so easily taken advantage of, and yet Jesus is called the lamb. So not only does he roar, he relinquishes. In other words, he gives of himself. That's a fascinating combination to see how Jesus does that. He doesn't just walk around the planet roaring and being like, I'm just dominating everybody. He also sacrifices. He puts himself in a position where he will love others enough to sacrifice himself. The cross proves that. All the power in the world at his fingertips, and he decides to get put on this torture device. to save other people who don't even want to be saved. That combination, lion and lamb, that is an amazing combo. And it shows that Jesus is complex, right? We're not done either. He's also Lord. And he reigns. He rules. It really ties in with lion, right? In other words, there's going to come a point when the Bible teaches the world will bow to this Jesus. Even people who are his enemies. You know what it reminds me of? You guys remember, maybe you don't, but there comes a point when Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and you have, Judas is going and backstabbing Jesus and getting this group of soldiers to come and arrest Jesus, and they think he's going to put up a fight. That's why they bring the soldiers. Like, we're going to, corner this guy. They're not using their brains because they just saw Jesus raise the dead and cast out demons. You really think he's going to be scared by a group of little soldiers with little sticks, but they're not thinking. They never really think that well or that deeply. So they come with their little army, and they're ready to go. And then Jesus, they ask, well, where are we? They don't even recognize him. They're like, oh, we're looking for Jesus. Are you Jesus of Nazareth? Apparently it's dark or something. Anyway. And he's like, I am he. And that I am statement is one of the most amazing titles for God. It's a way of saying, I'm not just past and present and future. I am past, present, future. I'm timeless. I'm eternal. I'm beyond. I'm a different category of being, in other words. And it says that they heard that. And these guys aren't friends or followers of Jesus. And it says they just fall. It says literally the Greek word is collapse on the ground. Just hearing the name of this being, their knees just give way. And then it's so weird and quirky because then they just get up and they're like, all right, we're going to arrest you. But there was this moment where they literally just melt. And that's how it's going to be at the end of time. The Bible teaches that there are going to be people, they see Jesus comes as a returning, conquering king, and people will just fall. And it's not like, oh, we've always loved you. No, we hated your guts. We don't want you or your kingdom here. But you're so overwhelmingly radiant and powerful that we can't even stop ourselves from falling and acknowledging that you are Lord. Even though we will never want to follow you willingly. Jesus is Lord. And then, fascinating, right? Because, lion, lamb, right? Lord, and then, like us. Jesus is not an alien. He became human. I know we talk about that a lot, but you have to think what it's like to not be human, to be infinitely higher than that, and then to voluntarily take on what it means to be like us. With all our limitations and all of our, there's just things we can't do. There's so many things we can't do. There's so many things that we're dependent on just to exist, right? But Jesus became like us. He relates. So in other words, on the one hand, he's like, Lord, you bow to me. But on the other hand, you can approach me. I'm approachable. I'm relatable. And that makes Jesus something that could be like this galactic fan-off where it's just like, what are you? You're just some dictator boss, like just flexing and just being powerful, and that's all you are. But to become human and to not just be, like, not even come to earth as like some really fancy human, like, Jesus came from a poor family, and it said he didn't even have a place to lay down his head, and he ended up being hated and disliked by a whole bunch of people. So he could have come and been like the most popular person in the sense of, he's just always just gushing out raw, divine power all over the place. But that's not his approach. He doesn't begin his ministry until he's 30. Until then, he's a carves wood. He's a carpenter, right? Last thing, and then we'll land this plane. And that is this. Jesus is not alone. So already we talked about the Father, right? Jesus sits at the right hand of the Father. A lot of times we like to say God, 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 God. And obviously, you know what we're talking about, the God of the Bible. But remember, the God of the Bible is three persons. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And they all are intricately connected in a way that is hard to imagine. But we understand a little bit how it works because of the fact that we echo it ourselves. Okay? So, have you ever thought of the Trinity as the original family? You have Father, Son, and then it's like the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit's like Father, Son, grandson. The Holy Spirit is a very important part of the Trinity. And if you notice, if we're made in God's image, right? We hear that a lot. We're made in God's image. We're made in God's image. That means some basic stuff like, why are we social? Why do we hang out with people? Why do we want friends and need friends and have families? Well, because God's a social being. We're made in His image. We're social too. And if you stop being social or if you try to fight that, you literally become weird and awkward and almost unhuman, right? It's damaging. It's destructive. It looks wrong. It feels wrong. It is wrong, right? It's not meant to be. Ever wonder why that is? Well, because we're modeled after this God that reveals Himself in 3 persons. And Jesus is the second person, the Son. But He's in connection to the Father. And then the Holy Spirit is someone who is connected to both of them. Trinity is a fascinating mystery. It's not something that you can explain away where it's like, oh, I got every nook and cranny of the Trinity figured out. Anyone who says that is lying or is wrong. It's not possible. But the Bible does talk about it and teach it. And it does explain a lot. It explains some really cool things. The Trinity are the original storytellers. Why do we love stories so much? Why do we love watching movies? Book reading is not as big of a thing as it used to be, but we're still hunting for good stories, things that grip us. And for some people, that's a good, like Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible, 13 movie or whatever. Or for some others, it's a romance, or for some others, it's a comedy. But there's a hunting for stories that we relate to or that we just get lost in. Why? Why are we like that? Oh, just because. No, it's more than that. The Trinity, God, He literally created all the ingredients of what stories are. The greatest stories in the world, the ones that capture the most attention, follow some key ingredients that God uses in His big story. They borrow from it, and they put their own spin on it. But they don't start completely from scratch. They borrow ingredients from God. And then use it to create. But why do we create? Isn't it fascinating how human beings are able to create stuff? Right? Think of the technology we're at. The technological age we live in. Why do we create stuff? Why is that? Well, it turns out the Trinity, they have imagination. They have creativity. We're made in their image, so we have imagination. We have creativity. Trinity explains a lot. They're the original artists. They're the original masterminds. Think about it, right? If you're into art, how many great artists are inspired by the artwork that already exists in nature? Right? It's not like I'm going to think of something completely out of nowhere, out of a vacuum. You can't. You literally have to borrow from what's around you. Some way, somehow, whether it's a personal experience or something you've seen or something you've felt, but you're borrowing from a world that's already been artistically designed. That was already there. God's a great artist. To the point that we can't make anything original. We have to borrow from Him in some way. And He loves that we do that. He wants us to do that. But He gets original credit. Right? So, these are all parts and pieces of the supernatural realm. Everything worthwhile about life, everything interesting, everything valuable is connected to that realm one way or another. So it is in our best interest to want to know more about it. It's exactly what we're going to try to do this week. So that's how we start. Let's land the plane. This is our, each session, at the end, we're going to have a connecting flight. And tonight's connecting flight, hopefully, is we get dropped off in this supernatural dimension. Let's find out more about it. Let's see what Colossians says. All right? All right. Let's pray, and my time is done. Dear Lord, your word is a fascinating book, but it's not just a book of stories and